Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning to another Supatease video, and the tier lists are about to begin. In today's video, we're going to be constructing a PvP tier list for the War Within pre-patch. Now, I will be working on tier lists for the actual War Within release, but I do want it to get a little bit more close to that release because we just saw last week a huge amount of changes went through, and then suddenly classes that were like F tier are now Omega God tier, and that's going to be happening in flipping, which I mean I could update weekly for you on the beta if you're interested to see like how your spec is going week to week. Let me know in the comments below if that does interest you, but it means that those tier lists are going to be very volatile and likely very inaccurate relative to the release, but it is something that I could maintain weekly, and then you could see the progression of your spec, which could actually be pretty good. But this tier list for the pre-patch is going to be pretty set in stone, having played a ton of Battleground Blitz and a ton of Arena at this point. This is kind of an all-encompassing tier list, looking at all types of PvP, not just necessarily Arena. For my own personal assessment, I would highly recommend you stick to Battleground Blitz. The queue times are way faster for it. I think the gameplay is a lot better. Arena specifically in the pre-patch feels really slow unless you're one of the God tier specs. And if you're not one of them, it just feels really slow and hard to get anything going. Now, Affliction Warlock, I think that this bad boy is an S tier specialization. You're doing a remarkable amount of damage at the moment, but it is kind of pad damage. It can be difficult to have lethal and finishing power, which the specs on the God tier definitely have available to them. And your tankiness has gone down a little bit with the Drain Life Healing changes. You're not as passively durable as you were before, which I think is holding it a little bit back from being God tier, but it's still a really solid pick overall. Arcane still has some of the same challenges as it did before. I think that Arcane is one of the specs that suffers from not having its hero talents in the pre-patch. I think having the spell slinger and being able to shoot out splinters and getting duplicate abilities like that really amps up your damage a lot. I think having only one school of magic makes it really difficult, and because some of the God tier specs that are God tier, it makes Arcane a lot weaker. Mages in general feel a lot weaker. So for me, I think Arcane is probably somewhere in the B to the A. You can get some decent burst damage off. Main problem in BGs is that Polymorph just breaks. Although you can find opportunities, I would recommend looking for healers that are standing outside of groups and clumps and trying to sheep them outside of those clumps. And then when they're stacked, then obviously just max damage AoE and try and blast them through. But I think Arcane is going to pick up a little bit, obviously, with hero talents, and it's missing a lot at the moment. Arms Warrior, they reverted the armor nerfs. So basically every patch in Dragonflight, they nerfed armor to make tanks, take more damage from bosses in dungeons, but it affects PvP. And any classes that are doing like direct physical damage that don't have a significant amount of bleed damage are very weak in the pre-patch as a result of reverting all of those armor changes. I think Arms Warrior is one of those, and Arms Warrior is also another spec that really relies on hero talents, especially things like Demolish at the moment with the beta and the War Within. Demolish is just doing an incredible amount of damage, and you don't have that. So I think Arms is probably going to feel very mid at the moment with that regard. It can be difficult to connect to a lot of the classes. Your survivability is going to be a lot lower at the moment in the pre-patch. Assassination Rogue is probably the best rogue spec at the moment. And again, mostly because you have bleed damage, which goes through armor, so you can bypass that. And you're still feeling like in a pretty decently strong position. You're maybe not as durable as the god classes or excessively high in terms of damage, though. So I'm going to just throw you up onto the A tier. You're probably one of the best melee, though. I don't want to just commit to being the best melee just yet, but definitely one of the best melee. Unfortunately, the other rogue specs are pretty lackluster. Balanced Druid does a huge amount of damage, although it has a completely different build and playstyle. You've got like this merger of Star Surge and Starfall together in this particular build. It focuses on a lot of damage modifiers, stacking Star Surges for your dots to hit target harder, your Starfires to hit really hard, but it's got a really nice damage profile. Feels really good in that regard. But it's similar to Affliction, where it can be difficult to find finishing power, but Cyclone is still really strong. You still have a lot of stats. It's still really good. I'm going to be throwing it up into like the best of the S tier. It's a really good pick. Beast Mastery Hunters, even despite the armor changes, I think BM Hunters can do a decent amount of damage. I haven't seen a lot of BM Hunters, to be fair, on the pre-patch to be able to like 100% lock in on this. I want to say it's somewhere between B and A. I think maybe I'll edge on the safer side that it's on the lower side in terms of feel, just because of the armor changes, probably making it a little bit difficult to do damage. Also, some of the best specs having a lot of AoE CC for your pets can be difficult, and things like Battleground Blitz, where your pets can get AoE CC'd as well, is going to be a little bit harder to actually sustain your damage. So I think I'm going to put it onto B, but it could easily be A. If anyone with more BM Hunter experience wants to let me know in the comments with this one, this is definitely one that I think is debatable to its position. Blood Death Knight's looking like one of the best tanks for PvP, especially Battleground Blitz. It's just completely unkillable. But its damage is a lot lower. So it's completely unkillable. It's a great flag carry. It's a great spinner. It's never going to die. I think it is the best tank because of that, honestly, at the moment. Durability is just super important, especially with how fast the stacks get in terms of flag carry maps. So I'm going to put it onto A tier as far as the tanks are concerned. You should never consider like tank versus DPS or compare them across like, you know, DK to assassin like that. You have to compare the tanks to the other tanks. Brewmaster I have not seen any of or heard any of. I'm going to assume that it's not superb. Again, with the armor changes especially, and considering if Windwalker is struggling at the moment, the Brewmaster is probably even more so. So I'm going to toss Brewmaster down here. It's possible that survivability is decent. It does have all right mobility. It doesn't have like the ability to jump up and down Z-axis, but it can port, which could be interesting. So it's got potential, but I think it's probably going to feel weaker in the pre-patch. Demonology is really tanky at the moment. And with all the changes coming through, it does a decent amount of damage as well. I kind of want to say that it's on the S tier. I think it's a really well-rounded spec. It's not pushing over the edge into the God tier, though, but it's still just as annoying as ever. You got a bunch of new pets to be able to call in. It's doing decent damage. You have MS as well as a caster, which is still making you stand out compared to the other ones. Destruction Warlock, I think, is decent, but not fantastic. I think you're better than a lot of other specs, but you've kind of fall flat. I don't know if I want to put you on S or A. You're probably like an high A, maybe a low S is where I want to put it at the moment. But you're going to get shut down pretty easily by the God specs at the moment. I could see it being difficult. So probably A is a safer spot, but you're decent in things like Battlegrounds. I think with Destro, it's similar to Arms, where you don't have Rune Nation, you don't have the hero talent that gives you your big one-shot hit at the moment, whereas other classes have a lot of finishing power even despite that, which I think is holding it back. Devastation Evoker, this is a hard one, honestly. You're decently tanky at the moment. The pressure that you put out seems to be lower, though, than, you know, the patch before. You're like one of the best casters in the game. Seems like your pressure is a bit lower now, in the pre-patch specifically. I don't know 100% where I want to put this. I want to say you're probably still A tier. I could see Battlegrounds being a little bit difficult, especially because you don't have the Mass Disintegrate yet. You don't have like a lot of AoE damage, and you can be easily locked down more so than other casters. But I think your damage output is still so great that it's probably going to be fitting somewhere in the A tier at the moment. Disc Priest, all of the healers are really strong at the moment. Just healing output in general is really high. But Disc Priest is probably the weakest of them all, from what I've seen. Now, its mobility and Battlegrounds is a limiting factor. It's like kind of immediate recovery is also a limiting factor. A lot of other healers, I think, have a lot easier like top off immediate heals. And damage output as far as being a healer, I'm not sure if anyone can keep up with Restorator. I kind of want to say Disc is kind of mid in this patch. Now, LA, this is an obvious one. This one's just going straight up into the God tier. It's just doing an insane amount of damage. All instant procs. It's really tanky. And for some reason, Earth Shield is bugged. So Earth Shield puts 8 stacks of Earth Shield on a target. And if you purge it, it only purges 1 stack at a time. So I don't know if the pre-patch is going to get changes or not. But that's like a change that's affecting the game, even as Resto or as Enhance. It's making you unpurgeable. Which obviously if you're playing with a Druid or something like that, it's protecting the HOTS. Yeah, you just can't die. Really OP. Really OP at the moment. Super fun. So if you want to abuse something in the pre-patch and just cheese your way through, definitely check it out. Enhance doesn't have its new talents. Not that its hero talents are like particularly empowering to it, especially since the Stormbringer nerfs with the release of the next expansion, but you don't really have anything new at all in this pre-patch, and I've yet to see like any of it, so this one's really hard for me. But I think with the armor nerfs, although you can get around that if you're playing the Lava Lash build, which I assume you would still, given that Stormbringer isn't out the hero talents, but you're probably going to be pretty mid. I think it's safe to say that you're probably going to feel pretty mid or lower than mid even, with the armor changes and not really getting anything new. It's unfortunate for Enhance. Feral Druid, you can make it work. You got bleed damage. I've seen some big ferocious bites. You still have Cyclone. You seem like you're in an okay position as far as melee DPS are concerned, but not like a super overpowered position either. So I'm going to toss you up into the A tier for now. Fire Mage, I played a lot of this. Your AoE damage is a bit lower. You don't have on-use Living Bomb anymore. It seems like they removed the Living Bomb Flame Patch procs as well, which is making it difficult to spawn a lot of Living Flames. You can get a decent amount of AoE, but most healers just completely ignore it anyways. And you're really squishy. You just die really fast to a lot of the best specs in the game. So I want to say you're probably better than Arcane, but it's like not by much. I'll put you on the A tier at the moment. I think just being mostly instant cast makes it easier to play than Arcane, but it feels like you were just very squishy at the moment. Frost Mage, haven't seen a huge amount of this. I'm going to imagine that Frost Mage without Frostfire hero talent trees, though, doesn't feel superb. The Frostfire bolt procs and instant frost bolts that you get from that are really good in the next expansion that you don't have yet in the pre-patch. I think you're probably like similar to Arcane. You're probably just mid. You can make it work. Melee DPS aren't particularly strong at the moment, though, which is like Frost Mage and Arcane Mage's niche. Like, you guys counter those. It's like LE Shamans, a lot of casters where you're typically weaker into them, which is why you're like, based on how the meta is, you're gonna feel more mid. Frost DK is really good. I don't know if I should put this on S or God, honestly. I think Unholy does feel a little bit better, but this is one of the few patches, few times where Frost DK is good. So if you want to whip out your Frost DK, I would definitely give it a go. You're doing a decent amount of damage to all the changes that they've made to it, and it feels really good since the changes that they've been making to the War Within that are also felt in the pre-patch. Fury Warrior, it's feeling the armor nerfs. It's tough to get damage going, similar to Arms. You do have MS that stacks, which you got bug fixed, and now it actually stacks properly, even with other MS effects, which is something unique to bring towards tunneling down a target. You got a decent amount of self-sustain. I just haven't seen enough of it. I want to say that it's probably like A tier or B tier, but I think the MS effect pushes up its desirability, especially in Battleground Blitz, more than other things. Guardian Druid is still a really good flag carrier, still has a lot of mobility. I think it's probably still easily comparable to Blood, if not better than Blood. So we'll put it right here for now. Havoc, a Demon Hunter, still really tanky. Damage output's a bit lower, but the couple times that I fought one, especially like I played Ellie, I played Fire Mage, it's still good. I want to say that this is still probably S tier, even still. I'm gonna put it up here. I think that I haven't seen a lot of it, but the few times that I've seen it, it feels like just as menacing as it was last patch. So I'm going to leave it up on S tier for now. Holy Priest, really strong healer at the moment. Lots of instant healing, being able to go immune, angel form, MD dots. Really good in team fights for Battleground Blitz. Still really good in arena. I'm going to say it's A tier for now for healers. I'm trying to organize this so it's like melee and ranged onto the same sides. For all of this, so it makes a little bit more sense as far as what's going on in terms of power. But Holy Paladin, not as good as Resto Druid. Resto Druid is just completely taking over everything, I think, at the moment. But it's not bad. But again, because of how good Resto Druid is, it's really tough to say how it's going to perform. Doesn't have the hero talent, so it doesn't have its new Word of Glory heal over time effect, but it still has a lot of powerful instant healing. It's really good into LE Shamans. It's really good into these casters, so it still feels really good. I think I'm going to put it onto A tier for now. I think you are still kind of liable to dying to a couple of the melee DPS that are in the game, but it's definitely strong. Marksmanship Hunter, haven't seen a lot of this one either. Now, this guy used to just absolutely pump people over. Now, I don't see that happening a lot. I'm going to imagine it feels kind of mid with the armor changes. So it's like somewhere between, B and A would be my best expectation. You are more durable since some of the changes to your defensive cooldowns and your talent trees, but being able to like actually finish a target. I feel like with how many Battleground Blitzes I've been doing, Hunter, when it's good, is usually like you see multiple of it and it's in the game. And I've not really noticed any Hunters. So it's got to be kind of mid would be my best expectation for this. Mistweaver Monk, absolutely God. This thing does so much healing. It's just impossible to kill. Never runs out of mana. Absolutely overtuned. Just Bis healer. I said Resto Druid, but Battleground Blitz, I think Mistweaver is completely the Bis healer. Arena, Resto Druid is probably better. So this is kind of like the trade-off between the two, depending on what you're focusing on. Again, I'd personally recommend Battleground Blitz right now because the Qs are faster, and I think the gameplay is better than current Arena tuning. Outlaw Rogue, I'm going to imagine is absolute dumpster, just with the armor changes. It's all reliant on physical damage. Has no like special MS effect. It has no burst, nothing scary about it for like Battleground Blitz types of scenarios. I don't know how it's supposed to get pressure against some of these classes in Arena. I can only imagine that Outlaw Rogue feels not very good right now. Preservation Evoker. Now the problems with Battleground Blitz is your limited range. You got to get really close, which gets you AoE'd and cleaved a lot, and you get kicked. But you're still doing a lot of damage. You still have a lot of throughput. I think you're probably overall very solid. I'm going to put you onto the A tier for now. Prot Warrior, dumpster. I tried it. I thought it would work. I don't know why the Ravager PvP talent says it's a 50% Mortal Strike when you have Ravager down. But then when you join a PG and you put a Ravager, it's only 25%. The number changes. It's like a PvP talent that has a PvP modifier that nerfs it, which didn't make any sense to me. But without the Ravager, it has like very low damage, very low survivability. It's got a lot of stuns, which is about the only thing going for it. But if you have other classes that have stuns in your group, which is pretty likely when you have 8 players in like a Battleground Blitz, it's not great. Prop Paladin, I haven't seen anything at all. I'm going to assume that it's not great. I'm just gonna auto assume that it's probably not great. It's not typically been a great kind of like Battleground FC type of tank previously. It doesn't have like a lot of extra CC either. It's basically just another healer. Although, you know, and with healing as high as it is, maybe it's unnecessary that it even has healing. But it's probably like somewhere here is where I would predict for it. Resto Shaman is really good, but I wouldn't say it's a Resto Druid. Resto Shaman with the cooldown changes, lower cooldown ascendance, a lot more like instant healing, a lot of the buffs that it got. I think that it feels really good. Grounding Totem is still really powerful. I think it's probably S tier as far as healers are concerned. I'm going to throw it up here. Resto Druid, this is an obvious one. It's going up into the God tier. You just do so much instant healing, just borderline unkillable, and you do a lot of damage now. And we don't even have the hero talents yet, which make Trent's Moonfire people, which makes your damage even higher. This spec is, you know, it's absolutely destroying everybody on the beta as well as the pre-patch. This spec is definitely an outlier. Rep Paladin, still really good. I think it is still really good. Has a decent amount of damage, decent survivability, definitely kind of like middle of the pack, high end. So like somewhere in here on the S tier. I think Rep Paladin is still doing really solid. Shadow Priest is really good, especially in Battleground Blitz. I think like, I mean, tuning matters a bit with this, but things like Psyfiend and the instant CCs that it has for healers, it can just solo something while also having a lot of like AoE pad damage to be able to support and run the team down after everything is dead. And it's tanky and it has decent team utility. I think Shadow is like one of the best specs you could bring to a Battleground Blitz. If you want to like be able to carry the game, I would like recommend duo queuing with like a Shadow Priest. I think that combined with like a really good DPS or a healer is like one of the best combos you could get. And I think in the current patch it's still really good as well. I'm not going to say that it's God tier. I think Ellie is still kind of taking the cake with that. But it's definitely the best of the S tier. Really good overall. Really well-rounded and strong spec. Subtlety Rogue, you guys are dumpster. You might be the worst spec in the game. I legitimately think Subtlety Rogue is the worst spec in the game. I've had Subtlety Rogues get my trinket open on me with a perfect combo in like the last patch that would have completely killed me, and they take like 5% of my health. I don't know what's going wrong with you guys in the pre-patch of Subtlety Rogue, but it's like I know the hero talents aren't that great for you either, so I can't even tell you it's really going to get better. But yeah, at the moment you're just doing, it doesn't seem like anything. And maybe somebody finds a build. Let me know in the comments down below if you've seen like maybe Palomar or you're figured out a build that makes it work. But every time I see somebody on Subtlety Rogue, they're not doing anything. Survival Hunter, decent amount of damage output. Main problem is that you don't have a lot of control as far as stuns. You have decent, like, you can like trap the healer. It's like Demon Hunters have incap, DKs have AoE blind. You don't really have like a lot of CC in a Battleground situation that makes you like superb. I don't think your burst is over the top. You're probably like, this is a hard one. I don't like, it's, I want to say like, this is a really hard one. I don't know if I want to put you on best B or like mid A. I'm going to put you on mid A. I think you might be a little worse than Assassin or Feral possibly, but I think it's still possible to make it work. Unholy Death Knight, this is an easy God tier lock. These guys, the AMS talents, the Anti-Magic Shield talents, you just have Anti-Magic Shield the whole time. And you're going to get more of them next patch as well with the hero talents. And your damage is just really high. So you're really tanky running around immune to CC, just mowing people down. But like these specs, will guarantee if you play these, you will feel really powerful and just absolutely destroy people. Vengeance Demon Hunter, still a really good tank. Probably still the best. Because of its mobility and its CC, although its CC has been nerfed a little bit, I think it's still likely going to be, you know, the best overall. Windwalker is very similar. I don't know if I put this on C or D. I don't know why I'm putting you higher than these specs, because I think you're probably just as bad as they are in the pre-patch. But something's got to be on the C tier, right? Like, I can't just leave it empty, or why did it exist? So you're going to fill the C tier, but you're probably D tier as Windwalker. The armor changes are a big a part of affecting this. Now, I don't know it's possible if like the PP talent that converted your physical damage into magic damage still exists. If it does, it's possible that that could be somewhat of like a viable substitution maybe. I'm just trying to give you a recommendation of something that you could do to try and make it more viable, because at the moment it's just not. But now when you get your hero talent, you get the celestial conduits, you feel a lot better in the War Within beta. So this is another spec where like pre-patch it feels meh, like much lower than meh. But then in the beta itself, Windwalker is a really strong spec. Augmentation Evoker, I haven't seen a lot of it. In the beta, it's really strong. It's like one of the best specs in the game. But I don't know if you're like hero talent dependent or not, and I haven't seen a lot of it. Now I can see in a battleground like buffing up your allies, like why would that not be good? So this is my expectation, is like that's probably decent. I'm gonna wrap it up here onto like the low A tier. I think it's probably a fair spot for the Augmentation Evoker. It's either like low A, high B, but I think with the group buffs that you're probably better than these specs at the moment. But this is my initial assessments right now for the pre-patch for the War Within. We don't know if this is going to change or not. It might, and I'll update it if it does significantly. And let me know in the comments down below if you'd like some insight as far as the beta, like weekly updates and looking and seeing what happens with the changes and where the specs move, so we can kind of track the progress of your spec. I think that likely would be a good idea. But I'd like you guys to let me know as well. But aside from that, thank you very much for watching the video, and I will see you in the next one.